You personally had a very Spinal Tap moment in that you had a shit sandwich review.
I mean, I've had lots of bad reviews. I don't know if I can remember every single one. My favorite bad review, because it's just so iconic, was my Pitchfork. I famously received a 2.9.
Out of what?
Out of 10. It's Pitchfork. And the opening line of it is, like the class moron who turns out to be developmentally disabled, Ben Lee's no fun to pick on anymore.
Hello, Cleveland! Turn your speakers up to 11 because it's time for Too Much Effing Perspective, the podcast that asks musicians and entertainers to relive their most Spinal Tap moments that may not have been too funny when they happened, but are hilarious in retrospect. I'm your host, Alan Keller, a comedy writer in LA and former lead singer of the least heralded Chicago band, The Falling Wallendas.
And I'm your co-host, Alex Hoffman, former tour manager for Radiohead and former lead singer of the least heralded Milwaukee band, The Vainglorious.
Our guest today got signed to Sonic Youth Thurston Moore's record label at the age of 15 by virtue of a 4-song demo he recorded in his bedroom. Singer, songwriter, Ben Lee.
Ben tells us about traveling around Japan with a bunch of anonymous friends, including Sean Lennon, Sophia Coppola, Spike Jones, and the Beastie Boys, being offered the headline slot at Coachella with Ben Folds and Ben Kweller, only to have one of his bandmates turn it down, and how his song We're All In This Together became the theme song for COVID quarantine.
So without further ado, let's go to the TMEP show!
It really puts perspective on things, doesn't it?
Not too much. There's too much
yeah,
effing perspective now.
Alex, in my music career, I was lucky only to receive 2 bad reviews, and they both came from the same publication, so it only really counts as 1. But it doesn't mean I've never gotten a shit sandwich review like Spinal Tap did for their album Shark Sandwich. You see, when you're shopping scripts in Hollywood and people have to put millions of dollars into something you wrote, they're a lot more judgmental. For example, this is a review, or coverage as they call it here, I received for a screenplay I wrote. And I quote, "The main 3 characters are overall unsympathetic and unlikable. For a romantic comedy, this is not funny." Then at the bottom of this critique, there are 7 categories that they judge and rate scripts by. I got poor, the bottom score on every one of them.
Whoa, that's harsh. And I thought, I've been hard on your writing, but I can tell now I've really actually gone quite easy on you, comparatively speaking.
Yes, well, to be honest, I don't disagree with them. That was a particularly shitty script I wrote. But I kind of hope that even at my lamest, I'm average. So I guess that's not true. But let me just say that same reviewer read a TV pilot I wrote and loved it. So I guess I'm not consistently bad either.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of it's not in your control, right? The person reading the script may not have liked the topic you picked or the genre. And honestly, it could be as simple as they're having a bad day. For our show, even on Apple Podcasts, we got a review where this diehard fan wrote, "Take a drink every time this dude mentions being Radiohead's tour manager." Ouch.
God, if I got that kind of comment every time I dropped a name, everyone would be an alcoholic in Los Angeles. But it's not just that. We just pitched this podcast as an audiobook, listeners, and hopefully it'll come through. And we got a really, really great response from one company, and we're crossing our fingers. But we also, before that, got a really shitty response from another publishing company. And, you know, I'm going to say this, and maybe you won't believe me, but it was not our fault. This woman obviously knew very little about Spinal Tap. I think she thought we were actually talking about the medical
procedure
of Spinal Tap.
This wasn't her thing.
Yes.
So it was not a great fit, but it's so much more fun to talk with someone who gets what you're doing. You know, and that's why you have to develop a thick skin, don't you think? I mean, you can't let one person's opinion shake your faith in your own work. And you and I rebounded pretty quickly on that one.
I have such faith in my music. If someone doesn't like it, it changes my opinion of them, not in what I've done. But I got to admit, I've never developed that kind of armor when it comes to my comedy writing. If I get a bad review or someone makes a snide remark, I'm immediately sucking my thumb and lying in a fetal position in the corner.
Maybe you'll get there someday, Alan. And in fact, you and I originally met around your music, and I loved it so much in that first cassette demo tape that I heard. But
Thank you.
I guess we can say that someone who does have that kind of armor is our guest today, songwriter Ben Lee. He's gotten great reviews, so-so reviews, bad reviews during his career, and he seems to treat them all with equanimity.
Equanimity, I give you 5 stars for using that word, Alex.
I'm a good $5 word kind of guy, and I'm sure to spring some more polysyllabic words on you today, Alan.
Would it be ironic if the word for polysyllabic was a single syllable?
Okay, Alan, sure. So on that lachrymose note, let's get to our chat with Ben. But first, a short break.
And now a musician who protested Trump's 2019 travel ban by releasing a children's album about Islam, Ben Lee. Ben, thanks for joining us. I just want to get right to brass tacks here. What is your favorite scene in the movie This Is Spinal Tap?
I have to have some national pride in that, and the scene where the line is used, "You're dressed like an Australian's nightmare." That is such a brilliant and prescient piece of fashion commentary. I love that.
And it comes from a Brit, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, Tony Hendra.
It's about his wife. And then she comes in dressed like an Australian's nightmare.
Totally.
But it's funny because the Too Much Fucking Perspective line is a line that I made a record in probably 99 or something called Breathing Tornadoes with Ed Buller, who's a British producer. And they were one of those artists that quoting Spinal Tap was religious, So that whole album, I just remember, "She's not my wife, whatever the fuck she is." That line was always being thrown about, and Too Much Fucking Perspective. And then Joaquin Phoenix, I remember when I met him and he could quote the entire movie front to back. It was like a more cinematic thing. But it's amazing that those scenes, it's almost like an avatar of who we are as musicians that has merged with what it actually means to be a musician. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The parody and the truth have now become so interwoven that in some ways, I don't know, it's almost like our cultural history, Spinal Tap.
Well, that may be even truer than you think. The Stonehenge scene in the movie is thought to be based on a Black Sabbath snafu where their Stonehenge prop was far larger than the original. But that actually happened the same year Spinal Tap, the movie, came out. So the two events were contiguous. Is that the word I'm looking for? No, they were concurrent.
I like the word contiguous. I'm going to start using that whether it's real or not. It's a very Spinal Tap word.
Thank you.
Contiguous is a cross between continuous and incongruous.
And incontinent, actually.
Yes. Yeah. But to what you were saying about Spinal Tap being part of rock music's cultural history, when you don't know if something really happened or if it was just in the movie Spinal Tap, when those two worlds merge so cleanly, that says something about how accurate the movie actually is. You personally had a very Spinal Tap moment in that you had a shit sandwich review from the Rolling Stone Australia. And can you tell us how you dealt with that?
Wait, what was that one?
Okay, I read about this on the internet, and the internet never lies.
It's possible. I've had lots of bad reviews. I don't know if I can remember every single one. My favorite bad review, because it's just so iconic, was my Pitchfork bad review, which, hang on, I'll just pull that up because it's kind of amazing. I famously received let's see, what's the score? I don't want to misquote it. I don't want to overshoot it too. It's okay, I got a 2.9.
Out of what?
Out of 10. It's Pitchfork. And the opening line of it is, "Like the class moron who turns out to be developmentally disabled, Ben Lee's no fun to pick on anymore."
That is cruel.
That's a good one though, right?
Yeah, it's pretty good. But I don't know, bad reviews, I always from the very beginning of my band Noise Addict, I remember I was on a label called Ouija Records that had Huggy Bear, and they sent us all our bad reviews. And I hadn't yet developed any kind of thick skin. I was horrified.
I'll bet.
And they said, we thought you'd get a kick out of it. And I was like, why? This is absolutely humiliating. But what they taught me in that moment is that the correct response is to laugh. Because unless you're going to be the kind of artist that wants to pander to critics, you're not making it for them anyway. So that's when we started doing collages and cutting out all the bad reviews and all that stuff.
Nice.
You got to build up your own personal defense mechanisms.
Absolutely. So this specific instance, you tell me if this is true. I read that you got a bad review from Rolling Stone Australia, and so you wore a shirt to the Aussie Grammys that said, "Who the fuck is the Rolling Stone?"
No, that's not me. That's someone else.
Alan, did you chat GPT that?
I do everything. That's all I do.
Maybe I might have said I did that. I don't know. I don't remember that story.
All right, forget that one. That's a big sucko.
You probably remember that, though. That's pretty...
No, what I did do, though, there was a famous band called Powderfinger, who was sort of like the Australian Matchbox 20 type thing, like a big rock radio band, but really beloved. And at a certain point, the singer was talking shit about me and called me a precocious little cunt whose music is a pile of shit. If you think of like the most beloved band in your home country, so it was like really, and so I printed t-shirts that had precocious little cunt written on the front and on the back that said Bentley, provoking healthy conversation.
That's how you got to deal with it, right?
Exactly.
I mean, even in Spinal Tap, right? They list their bad reviews, but they're smiling about it. And they even go, that's a good one, right?
Yeah. Well, it is funny, isn't it?
Funny.
I mean, obviously it's more fun to be loved than hated, but you do realize that when you come to the fundamentals of what it is to make art, you just need to provoke a reaction. And someone having a negative reaction is valid. I mean, people don't like things for all variety of reasons, but to move somebody enough to lash out at you, it's kind of like you've touched a nerve there.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, that kind of moves into the zone of cruel. Certainly, it's antithetical to artists supporting each other. Had you met this guy? Had there been any kind of negative interaction?
No, I'd never met him. I think...
That's so bizarre.
I don't know. It's very complex because you get into sort of a lot of stuff that's very cultural in Australia. And my whole thing at that point was like, I was obsessed with Andy Kaufman. You know, when Andy Kaufman was doing his I'm from Hollywood shtick.
Yeah.
I had elements of that in the way I was talking to my audience and to the media with this sort of like bravado and superiority that was, I was the butt of the joke. But to people that don't get it, they think you're making fun of them. Whereas like when you look at Andy Kaufman now, like what he was doing about wrestling in the South, wrestling women, you're embarrassed for him. You don't actually think Southern people are stupid or anything. You're just like, oh my God, this is like, you're putting yourself in a crazy situation. Why are you doing this? And it's cringy. But anyway, so in Australia, there's a very humble, salt of the earth kind of thing that performance art is not really appreciated in.
Well, you know, I'll tell you something about critics too, is you can be a good acerbic critic like Lester Bangs, right? And also you have to look this up because the greatest review ever is from a movie called Cannonball Run 2. It's Burt Reynolds,
Oh yeah,
right?
I remember that movie.
And there's a very famous review from the Honolulu paper that is a billion times funnier than the movie.
I mean, bad reviews are funny. I still laugh at bad reviews. And I mean, some of them, when they're just so brutal, it's almost like the trolling instinct. And there's a genius to that too. So I don't know. It's all part of the art.
I just want to say one more thing about that, which is a band that you may remember that I tour managed called the Bodines out of Milwaukee.
Sure.
Their first album, Love and Hope and Sex and Dreams, came out, produced by T-Bone Burnett, got a much bigger buzz than people expected. Rolling Stone named them the best new artist of, I don't know, I think it was 86 or something like that. Fast forward 10 years and they were probably on their fifth album at that point or whatever. And they called it Blend, which was sort of a soft pitch over the middle of the plate for some critics to just replace the E with an A.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking about some of this stuff more recently because the world has real problems. It's just so crazy the way people get worked up about 50 or 60 minutes of music that three friends are making that like they take it as such a personal affront, and how I think in some ways that was part of what pop culture did that was destructive to our species, is it made us obsess about minutia and judging minutia instead of thinking big picture about like what we should be putting energy into protecting or fighting in the world or something. And You know, Like a Velvet Glove, Cast in Iron, Dan Clow's comic book, you know, the guy who did Ghost World or 8 Ball. Anyway, he had this one scene where he said, the key to being a junkie is finding meaningless little things. Like the drug addiction and the procuring of the drugs, it becomes this routine that distracts you from any bigger conceptual thinking. And in some ways that makes life more manageable. And I think we've done that a lot with culture. We've taken out our rage on artists who, like, if you think about me as an artist, what is my biggest crime to someone that hates me? I didn't make sounds the way I started using drum loops when they didn't want me to. Like, this is really low on the totem pole of important issues for people to get enraged by. So anyway, I've just been thinking about that lately with criticism, how it all seems sort of so meaningless now. Taking your rage out on artists who are really just trying to like evolve and do their thing and experiment and whatever.
Yeah, but the game's changed now. It seems like the comments themselves get as much attention as whatever was posted in the first place. And for those trolls to go viral, they have to be as hateful and obnoxious and vulgar as possible. I know my daughter had this show on YouTube called Life Hacks for Kids. It went for 3 years. DreamWorks put it out, very popular. And suddenly when she was like 12 years old, some guy was taking video from the show, turning it black and white, and putting a gun sight over my daughter's head. I mean, again, she's 12 years old. Fortunately, our great director and friend, Jeannie Rochar, used her detective skills to track this kid down by using social media to find him. And I got the phone number and ended up having to threaten the mother to get him to stop. But it was a horrific event. And this is a little kid just showing her crafts skills on the internet. And that couldn't even escape like anti-Semitic, horrible comments.
I think we can comfortably say that we are not a species that has learned how to manage our emotions particularly well.
No.
That's a fair conclusion.
Yeah. I was in a band called the Falling Wallendas, and we were recording at Gravity Studios in Wicker Park, probably at the same time
when I was doing Grandpa
when you were doing Grandpa Wood at
right.
Edfall, right? And it's funny because we had Fred Armisen on here, and Fred, of course, was in Trenchmouth at the same time. Like, there's this universe that we're all in, and that was an exciting scene, don't you think, back in the early 90s?
Yeah, for sure. And also I think there was some very interesting character building experiences. Like, I think a lot about artists having to settle shows. That was something you did. I don't know. Personally, I've never been particularly good at accounting. After I've come off stage and I've maybe had a couple beers and there's friends around, like, as if I'm going to accurately be able to check all the accounting for the show. And you end up trusting as artist whatever the club owner's giving you, basically. And I thought how that was like so character forming. Nowadays, everything is done digitally and there's like deposits in escrow accounts. And you know what I mean? It's like all that stuff from that era. It's sort of like, that's what built us, I guess,
Well, that's why we both needed a guy like Alex, who was really a hard-ass tour manager. I've witnessed him in action, and even club owners didn't want to fuck with Alex.
Yeah. That's why you also realize, like, you'd hear stories about rappers where it was a bit more of like a, like a heavy situation, like the settlement at the end of the night sometimes, because they rightfully were like, hey, this is a business and I want to make sure I'm getting paid properly. Yeah.
Well, Chuck Berry, right? He wanted cash before he played.
Yeah, totally.
So being in that scene in Chicago, do you remember any Spinal Tap moments?
I think that whole scene was sort of anti-Spinal Tap. Like when I went to Chicago in 93 to make Grandpa Wood, I hoped it would be, I'd seen the Doors movie, I thought that's how recording sessions were going to be. I had like fantasies in my mind.
And you were 15, right?
Yeah, and I was 15 and you got there and it was all these very smart, cultured people that looked at music like very feminist and alternative and intellectual and I don't know, just all very smart people, not a lot of debauchery. So I think for me, I was kind of shocked at how grown up the whole vibe was, you know?
I want to just ask you about that. You went to Chicago when you were 15 to record?
Yeah, just on my school holidays. Because I'd made these demos with my band in Australia in like 92. And then the Beastie Boys and Sonic Youth, when they were touring through Australia, they got hold of these demos. So they both had labels. So I did my first record out through Thurston's label, Ecstatic Peace. And then Mike D at Grand Royal wanted to put out, I was also making all these just acoustic tapes that he heard. And he was like, oh, Exile in Guyville had just come out. So he said, why don't you go record with this guy? This would really flatter your music. So he connected me with Brad.
Interesting.
So that's why I went to Chicago.
That's so cool. Did your mother or father travel with you, or what?
No,
tell us what, like coming to America as a 15-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, I was an unaccompanied minor, but Brad got on the phone to my mum and dad before. But they'd already met Mike D, and they knew the people at my label. And it's so tricky with stuff like this because when a young person starts getting creative and the world responds to it, you'd have to be a heartless monster to put the brakes on that. You know what I mean? They wanted to talk to everybody and get a sense, but very quickly it was like you get on the phone with Brad before I came out there and he was like, oh, we're going to take Ben to the Museum of Natural History. And he was serious. He wasn't putting on a show of like, no, actually it's going to be blowjobs and tequila shots. You know what I mean? It was like, it wasn't that at all. So I just think, I don't know. I've got to say though, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but I really kind of fell in with a good crowd as far as like the potential dangers that some young performers have. I don't know, like even like bands like Silverchair, who were on a much more corporate path, were more exposed to more dangers and pressures and all that kind of stuff than I was. I was just surrounded by like cool alternative people who wanted to talk about songs and go 7-inch vinyl shopping and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but there's also the other end of it. We took it so seriously.
Yeah.
We didn't have the fun that we could have had. And I'm not even talking about drugs, but there was a lot of competition. And, you know, like every Tuesday in the middle of the night, I would get a fax of our radio play. And so I would be up all night. And it was like, we're only getting this much play in Akron. You know, it's
that's sort of why I felt a bit rebellious to indie rock in that way. There was almost like sexlessness. It wasn't sexless, like incel kind of thing. It was just a bit nerdy.
Yeah.
I think I sort of just rebelled a bit against it. And I think I quite liked a bit more glamour and debauchery and all that sort of stuff. Because I just thought, if you like rock and roll, that's sort of part of what you're like just destined to explore and try and figure out what is your personal relationship to.
if you can not go overboard and ruin your life, right? Like a lot of people that I know that became famous, they didn't handle it well. And you really have to be level-headed to get into that situation and have fun with it without going overboard, obviously.
You know, I think about that with psychedelics and stuff because I like psychedelics and I think they're pretty useful. But some people are like, oh, isn't it dangerous? And I'm like, yeah, it is. I mean, but life is sort of dangerous. Pretty much every element we're talking about, fame, art, vulnerability, sexuality, drugs, it's all dangerous. You can ruin your life in any one of those areas. I don't think what we're doing as human beings is about creating the absolute safest path with no risk. It's just about taking smart risks, I guess.
I want to talk a little bit more about Grand Royal Records,
Yeah.
the Beasties record label. And if I recall correctly, that was an imprint of Capitol Records. Is that right?
Well, the way it started was just as a label on the Beastie Boys records. But then when they put out Luscious Jackson and stuff like that, it wasn't automatically through Capitol, but they had some kind of understanding that it could be bumped up and go through Capitol.
I see.
So I only had one record that went through Capitol, and that was Breathing Tornadoes. All the others were just Grand Royal with whatever the distribution service they were using at the time was.
Got it.
But like Luscious Jackson went through Capitol. Sean Lennon's record went through Capitol. It was there if there was like commercial traction, I guess.
Yeah, I hear you. That makes sense. Interestingly, we've had just a number of Capitol Record stories from different guests on this show. I mean, I tour managed Radiohead on Pablo Honey. That was Capitol.
Yeah.
The Dandy Warhols were on Capitol. The old 97s were not on Capitol, but during the bidding war were flown out to LA by Capitol and had some very bizarre experiences, meeting with Gary Gersh, for example, and things like that.
Yeah, well, I remember, like, do you know Julie Panabianco?
That name rings a bell.
So she worked at Capitol, and she was like the cool A&R person who was like friends with the Blues Explosion and REM and U2. Like, we were all friends with her. And I just remember Russell Simmons from the Blues Explosion, when Julie was organizing my car, he was like, demand a town car, demand a town car. It was that era where like major labels had a lot of money. And the people who were working there had access to those cards. So you did try and get them to buy the drinks and pay for the dinners and all that stuff that I don't think now is really, that doesn't happen that much anymore.
Totally. I remember when I was in LA with Radiohead, this was before Uber and Lyft, well before, and we had a limo to go do something, some press or whatever. And I asked the Capitol Records guy, once the press was done, I'm like, can I actually keep the car for an hour and go to Kinko's to make some copies and stuff? I got some stuff I got to do. He's like, yeah, I guess so. Just don't keep it too long.
It's funny, like people who make my type of music, it's been and gone for. But I'm sure like Ed Sheeran's bopping around and Gracie Abrams, they're probably getting limos from their labels.
Gracie Abrams probably had a limo her whole life.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's probably right. And she deserves it now for sure. Did you go to the Capitol Tower? Do you have any Spinal Tap moment stories from actually like being within the circular walls of Capitol?
Oh man, not particularly from in there. I mean, it was only one record that I did through Capitol, and I was living in New York at the time. I do remember something interesting. I don't know if this is particularly Spinal Tap. It's just something I've always found really interesting. Like when I went into the promo department, they said, look, we can give you as little or as much information about the details, like the numbers and all that, as you want. We have artists who have never asked. And then we have artists like Art from Everclear, who is on that 100. I was like, oh man, that is fascinating. Because didn't you always perceive him as being like kind of like a businessman? Like he had a good business mind. I guess he was like really into it. So I just thought that was interesting.
That is interesting.
And nowadays, like everyone's like that. You know what I mean? Like everyone is paying attention. But back then it was much more separating the business from the art. But the fun of that era, the Grand Royal stuff, was a lot of it was like you'd go to Japan and it'd be like a whole group. It'd be like Beastie Boys, Luscious Jackson and Sophia Coppola and Spike Jonze, and we'd all sort of be there. And, Nigo from Bathing Ape coming in and giving everyone clothes and being a rock star or a rock star entourage in Japan. That was like where you really felt it.
Yeah.
One of my favorite, sort of most decadent, but actually like beautiful experience was Sean Lennon got Capitol Japan to take the entire entourage to what had been John and Yoko's favorite restaurant.
Oh, wow.
And it was a vegetarian Buddhist temple just outside the city where everything they served was grown on site. And it was just delightful. And you just go, when will I ever have access to that type of experience again? So, there's all like the perks, the fun. And there was, the amount of limos that you, being in the music industry, that you had access to riding in the night. I can't remember the last time I was in a limo. It was probably back then. Like, it's also just now environmentally, it's so ostentatious. It just looks weird. But I remember being with like Spike and Sophia and Bjork and a few people, and we were riding around the Grammy parties in a limo that Spike had gotten. And the ongoing joke for the whole night, I was in a blazer and slacks and a white shirt, and I would stand up outside the roof of the limo and everyone would cheer me on and call me the bar mitzvah boy. And that was the same night. I don't remember this because I'd had a few drinks, but apparently Stephen Jenkins introduced himself to me. And the story goes that I turned around and just started peeing in a plant. But I don't remember that, but I do know that he held a grudge against me, and I'm assuming because it was something to do with this exchange. Because later, my girlfriend at the time met him somewhere, and he was like, oh yeah, I know your boyfriend. He's a support act, right? So he obviously had some like grudge against me, so I'm assuming it was because of the tree peeing or whatever that was.
Oh my goodness.
That's an awesome story.
I'll tell one more limo story and then we can move on, which is this. When Radiohead first flew to New York to start the Pablo Honey tour, Our tour bus was supposed to be ready. I was actually going to take it up to JFK. We're just going to load everything in and then bring the band back into the city. But something happened. The bus was running behind. So the bus company arranged for 3 limos to go to JFK, 2 for the band and crew, and 1 for all the gear. So they were thrilled, actually, to be, again, limoed as their first experience coming into the United States, and got everybody into the cars and the gear into the 3rd limo to head to SIR in Manhattan, the rehearsal space. And as we were driving into town, the driver said to me, well, I remember when I drove the Led Zeppelins in from the airport. And apparently Zeppelin's drummer Bonzo Bonham said, I'll pay you $100 if you beat the other car into town. Wow. And so this driver stepped on it to get into Manhattan as fast as he could. And then Bonzo stiffed him.
Oh,
that's
Bonzo.
brutal.
Karma got him.
Bonzo.
So speaking of Radiohead, my favorite album of Radiohead is The Bends. But I also like the Bends, your band, the Bends, with Ben Kweller, Ben Folds, and was Ben Kingsley in there?
No Ben Stiller.
Oh, damn. But you guys put out a 4-song EP, which I love. And just wondering whatever happened to that group and any Spinal Tap moments with you hanging out with those 2 crazy guys.
Well, there is a story that there's sort of a cautionary tale in it, I guess. I mean, that was the most organic thing. That was Ben Folds had actually been offered to open for Bob Dylan around Australia at that time. And he wanted to do something a little bit more vibrant and connected to, at that moment, Dylan, he was playing for an older audience and everything. So he was like, what if I did a tour with Ben Lee and Ben Kweller? And the promoter got all excited. And I was like, and if we're going to do that, let's spend a few days rehearsing and record an EP and have something to sell at the shows. Because, I'm from indie rock, make an EP. That's the answer to everything. So that just sort of took off. And it was very interesting because we were on MTV's You Heard It First or whatever that thing was, where they played it like a lot. They did our little news piece and little video 20 times a day. So like so many people. And we got offered a headline slot at Coachella.
Really?
That year. And they wanted to give us a 2-hour set.
Wow.
That was all of our music individually and combined.
How cool.
But what had happened was Ben Kweller had already been offered a side stage, his own thing, and he just wanted to do his own thing. And it was such a lesson because really what happened at that moment was the doors closed on the whole thing. I don't mean by the industry. I just mean like cosmic timing. With collaborations, there's a magic in which the timing works and everyone shows up and everyone surrenders and goes, okay, this wasn't on my schedule, but let's go with it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. And you roll with it. And then as soon as you pump the brakes on it, it's just over. You know what I mean?
Yes.
that moment, it just ended. It just ended.
Momentum is a real thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a comedy writer. I've tried to sell shows and movies, and it's like you can feel it building, and there's something comes up, and then it's fucked.
Yeah, once you get your foot in the door, you can't take it out because it's like someone else is coming along. Yeah, that was a big lesson for me. And it's okay, it's okay that things don't go on forever and that in reality, Kweller needed to do that.
Right.
But I do remember Ben Folds saying at the time, he was like, he just doesn't want to stand on a stage with a 47-year-old balding piano player. Because, Kweller was hanging out with the Strokes and the Kings of Leon and all that kind of thing. But yeah, it is real. And I think the thing is, once you experience a few moments of genuine momentum, you also start realizing there's no point in pretending there's momentum there when there isn't.
Yeah.
Because it's a real thing.
You can't get it going again. It just can't. There's no gas. You ran out of gas and you've got to push the car all the way to the gas station. And by then, forget it.
It could come around again, just it won't happen on your schedule.
Yeah, they call that flow as well,
Yeah.
right? I think that's the same idea.
I want to pivot to your extraordinary wife for a second, Ione Skye. Ione's a brilliant actress. She was in the great movie River's Edge, as well as being the love interest in John Cusack's iconic boombox moment from the movie Say Anything, directed by Cameron Crowe. But aside from being a movie legend, Ione also has an impeccable rock and roll pedigree. Her dad is Donovan, who wrote and performed such amazing songs as Season of the Witch and Mellow Yellow. And so Donovan is your father-in-law. And I'm wondering if he ever told you any Spinal Tap moments from his career as rock and roll's premier hippie.
He is a member of Spinal Tap. We've gone to visit him in Cork in Ireland, and he's still living the 60s dream.
Sure.
Going down to the well to get the sacred waters and out to the stone circles. And I mean, fully,
Really?
fully. I don't know. Yeah, he's got amazing stories. I guess he taught some tunings to George Harrison because they were in India, with the Maharishi. And that really affected a lot of George Harrison's guitar playing and songwriting. And yeah, but the thing is too with Spinal Tap is the only way you have a long career is if you've reinvented yourself multiple times, often in humiliating ways. That's the nature of show business, So there's, Don's had all those things. He had the Beat Cafe that he came out and it was all like he was hosting a beat poetry reading. But that, I don't know, I kind of find that sort of stuff endearing because it's like when people tell those stories about Stevie Nicks or things that happened really debauched that were really on the edge. And you go, yeah, but you made it through, you made it through and I guess I celebrate the humiliating stuff as much as the victories, in long careers. So, yes, I can't think of anything specifically, but whenever I'm hanging out with him, I do feel like I'm still in Spinal Tap.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, the Beatles' trip to India is a monumental moment in pop culture and rock music, right?
Yeah.
So many things come out of that, and he was there.
Yeah, and, it's also that a lot of the 60s looms very large over all of us who play music and rock music. But you also realize that even for the people who were there, for Ione's mum, she was the door girl at the Whiskey. So she saw Jimi Hendrix, Love were my favorite band to see. She saw everyone play. But you also just realize life moves on and we're all still getting our groceries done. And we're all, even being there at these pivotal moments of culture, it doesn't save you. I feel like I saw Nirvana in 92. That changed my life. That made me want to be a musician. Young people look at me like, oh my God, you saw Nirvana, as if you're enlightened. You know what I mean? I was like, yeah, it was a great show.
During COVID, you had live music on Instagram, almost like a club.
It was like a talent show.
And then you had the song, We're All In This Together, which kind of became the theme for that wonderful time that we'll always look back on.
Yeah.
Any Spinal Tap moments come out of those events?
The funniest thing about that was, I don't know if this will mean anything to you, but there was this guy, music industry guy in Australia who's passed away since, called Michael Gudinski. And he was like a Clive Davis, Suge Knight, with really good taste, but a godfather of the Australian music industry. And when he calls you, you just know you're about to say yes to something. So that song had blown up in Australia, and there was a night he calls me, he was like, Ben, it's Michael. I've been up for 3 days. I'm organising a live concert with everyone from their home, all this stuff. And anyway,
awesome.
It was just basically I got talked into doing this live broadcast of the song from the house. But you really see what people are made of in those types of moments. But the quarantine talent show thing we were doing was just something me and my daughter were doing, where we just invite people on to do their talents and stuff on Instagram Live. And it was great because we had Christian Lee Hutson came on and played Northsiders before his first record had come out, and that was amazing. And there were different musician friends, and then people would come on and do magic. And then every now and then, it's the hard thing about anything that's got an open mic element to it is it can get people too excited. So, when you get somebody who's been practicing their 11-minute version of Hallelujah and decides this is the moment I've been waiting for, I'm going to show the world what I can do. No, exactly. So, yeah, but everyone was good, really. Yeah.
That's really fun. Before we let you go, we always say one more. This really will be it. Your homage, if that's the right way to frame it, to Evan Dando, I Wish I Was Him. I really enjoyed watching that song on YouTube. Any Spinal Tap moments with Evan?
Oh, every moment is a Spinal Tap moment with Evan. I've toured with Evan, I've recorded, and I wrote a couple songs that were on his debut solo record, Baby on Board, which people really like those songs. One called Hard Drive and one called All My Life.
He's crazy as hell, he drinks Diet Coke. He gets his enemies sent by air, not boat. I wish I was him, he gets the girls at his
The thing about Evan is he's got that shamanic id quality. You never know what's coming next for him. And it's like, sometimes it's like extreme joy and sometimes it's like a moment of inexplicable rage. In some ways, I think that makes him a good rock star because he's like a kid. This is like a dark kind of thing, but it just still makes me laugh. That I remember we were in the studio with the Robb brothers and we were doing like a B-side or something. And a woman who had been working at the studio was just sitting in there and it was like people were drinking and it was really fun and everyone was just getting onto each other. And then we're all just laughing and making music. And he suddenly turns to you and goes, "Who the hell are you even? What are you doing here?" And it was almost like the way someone on the spectrum, like it was so honest and so real, but I almost started shaking just out of a protectiveness. And sometimes I think what rock stars do, and the reason that we love them, is that they have no time for societal etiquette. And that's actually what we're looking for in these figures. I've never been like that. I'm a bit more of I'm a mensch, you know what I mean? I try and be. But those things, those rock star tantrums, I saw so many of those. And then it would 20 minutes later, be back in like a good mood and all that stuff. And I think I just ultimately, that is sort of where emotionally, I part with rock stars. Life is difficult enough without adding in the chaos of tantrums.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that drove me out of tour management.
Yeah.
I kind of aged out of it. It was one of the things I couldn't deal with. I will say another funny Evan Dando story. Again, I should have said at the top of this, Evan Dando from the Lemonheads. When my wife first moved to LA, before we were married, she worked at the Troubadour. So she saw a bunch of amazing shows and he played there. And after the show, he was a sex symbol at that time, right? In the early mid-90s, absolutely a sex symbol. And a woman came up to him after the show and, pulled up her skirt or something and showed that she had Evan Dando tattooed around her thigh.
Wow.
And he just recoiled in horror in my wife's telling of the story.
Too easy. That's too easy.
yeah, exactly. As opposed to, I suppose, even sort of a sense of flattery, like really someone's going to put my name permanently on their skin.
I really think the thing that sets apart the people who have the rock staritis is narcissism. I'm sure in some way he was tickled by that, but it's this almost 100% single-minded pursuit to do what you want to do. And you need that in a way, but it's self-destructive, right? I think the biggest people that I've met in the industry, they don't really think about anyone else. And they might...
Yeah, no, they're big babies.
They're big babies. And you might think they care about you, but you could know them for years. But then at the end, you're like, they really don't give a shit. Really. They're really out for whatever they do, But... And God bless them, because we need those big rock stars.
Yeah, we need those stories.
Well, Ben, can you tell our listeners where they can look you up on social media to see what you're doing, what you're promoting, please?
Yeah, I'm Ben Lee Music. And I also have a podcast with my wife called Weirder Together that we're about to start the new season of. And those things. Find me on socials, listen to the pod. Put out a record last year called This One's for the Old Heads with... John Worster and Jason Narducci as the rhythm section. Really good
cool
power pop record.
Thank you so much for being with us, Ben. It's been really a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really fun.
Tell Ione she can get back to cleaning her house. I understand that totally.
Will do.
Take it easy, man.
Listeners, it feels like Ben Lee gave us a new chapter of Bartlett's quotations in this episode. Let's see. He threw out the inspirational quote about collaborations, where he said, "There's a magic in which the timing works and everyone shows up and everyone surrenders and goes, okay, this wasn't on my schedule, but let's go with it." I really love that one. Then he shared the Coachella hot take when Ben Folds said of Ben Kweller, he just doesn't want to stand on stage with a 47-year-old balding piano player. Then, of course, what resonated the most with me was Ben's quote on rockstar mood swings when he said, "Life is difficult enough without adding in the chaos of tantrums." Amen to that. Too Much Effing Perspective is a Milwaukee Talkies original. Our editor is Gretchen Kilby. Our music composer is J.K. Harrison. Please follow us on Instagram at TMEP Show. Visit our website at tmepshow.com to sign up for our email list and find our other episodes featuring rock stars, comedians, and entertainment luminaries on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen.
Although it would be as great as having armadillos in our trousers, this podcast is not affiliated with This Is Spinal Tap, and no person or entity connected with the film has sponsored or endorsed its content. This podcast is not affiliated, sponsored, or licensed by Authorized Spinal Tap LLC or Century of Progress Productions.
Evergreen Podcast Network.